What is up? Welcome to DFS Academy for the 2024 fantasy season. I was thinking about this today, and it's funny. There's such a ramp up to the redraft season. We get the rookies. We start talking about mock drafts. We start actually drafting sometimes in the middle of July. DFS is just not here one day and here the next day. And so that means this show, especially for folks who've never played DFS before, is going to be very, very important. It's going to be me. It's going to be Austin. It's a little bit of a new show this year, but we're going to have fun with it. Let's get into it. Oh, yeah. New intro video, new look Club Fantasy. I was going to say same DFS Academy, but it's not. Kelly Singh has left us for the year. She is a very, very busy woman, so she leaves with our blessing. You're stuck with me and Austin, which means you are about to get some excellent cash advice and some terrible tournament advice, because that's going to fall on my shoulders a little bit now. Austin's going to keep me in check, though. We're going to have a ton of fun with it. I am Ryan Weisse, your host. The expert on this show is my good friend, Austin Amandolia. Austin, it's only been like 2 weeks since we've seen each other, but how are you doing now that there's no Mock It Like It's Hot for us to talk about?
I'm doing great. It's actual lineups we get to start, and now I get to start stressing about DFS lineups. I'm honestly really excited. Got my showdown slate happening as we record this. See how it goes. But happy to be back for another season, year 2 of the show.
Yeah. Speaking of the showdown slate, I want to quickly just throw out for folks, you can actually play DFS with us. So Austin sent out the invites this past week for our Sunday main slate and tonight's showdown slate. And I think you already have like the Detroit game showdown slate was available or something. So
yeah, it's weird.
You will find links in the description of this video and in Austin's DFS article that I still will be out, I believe, be out tomorrow. If not, it'll be out this weekend. But you will find links to play fantasy football and DFS with us. We pay for a very small $2 entry fee. I believe it's not even winner takes all. We pay like the first 3 spots, correct,
Yep.
Austin? So there's a good chance to get your money back. But more importantly, if you win, we announce you on the show. So you get to hear your name live on our airwaves every Friday when we publish this show. So it's a very good incentive to play with us. You're probably better at DFS than us. Very rarely did the host win this thing last year. We had a lot of really cool people playing with us, and it was a lot of fun. So make sure you guys are checking for that in the description of this video and in Austin's article tomorrow. And you know what? While you're following us right now on YouTube, why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button? Club Fantasy is growing every single week. We just recently crossed 1,200 subscribers after our very slow climb to 1,000. We're doing really, really well, and we appreciate each and every one of you guys. We go live so many times throughout the week. This is not a live show, but we have a start-sit show that's actually going to be on the airwaves tomorrow, where all we do is answer your questions. And that's just one of the many times you're going to get fantasy advice from Club Fantasy. For that subscribe button, which is absolutely free, you're going to get a ton of great fantasy data. Austin, this show is about DFS. And the first thing I want to do is, there's going to be people who were with us last year, but there's going to be people who are going to discover the show who have never experienced DFS before. So if you could give a quick breakdown of what DFS is, but more importantly, certainly for our show, the difference between cash games and tournament games, because that's how we're going to break this show down this year, is cash versus tournament.
Yeah, so first off, if you're totally new to DFS, DFS stands for Daily Fantasy Sports. Concept is you set a lineup just for that day. Most formats have a salary cap, and you get to set a certain number of players depending on the type of slate, depending on the sport you're playing in. For football, on the Sunday slate, it's 9 players, most often on DraftKings and FanDuel. You just have to stay within the salary cap. Better players are priced higher, worse players are priced lower. So that's kind of the game theory. That's the trick involved. You have to kind of balance your lineup and figure out a way to max out your fantasy points while staying within the salary cap. The difference between cash and tournaments. When we talk cash, we are talking 50-50 contest where the top half of contestants win, the bottom half do not. Double ups where if you are in the top half, you double your money. And head-to-heads, where you go 1v1 against another person, like Ryan and I are going to do on this show.
Yeah.
And the winner also, well, they don't double their money, but they nearly double their money.
Yeah.
We focus on cash because it is much easier to win. And it is a good way to build your bankroll and help fund your tournament hobbies. Now, I focus on cash because I try to make money doing this. If you're just out here doing lottery tickets, then the tournaments are for you. And the tournaments, the deal there is it is very top heavy where the cash prices are. Typically, only the top 20 to 25% of lineups will win money. And even if you're winning money in a tournament, you are only winning substantial money if you are in the top 1 to 5% of lineups. You have to perform incredibly well to win money off of the tournaments. There are many different sizes. We'll talk about small field tournaments, which is like a few hundred contestants, to your giant milli maker ones that have hundreds of thousands of lineups. There are all sorts of different structures and nuances involved. That is the basics. We'll talk more about some of the nuances sprinkled throughout the show throughout the year. But that's the main thing you need to know. As for me, just so you know how I'm spending my money, I'm putting 90% of my bankroll every week in cash lineups because I'm doing that right now, especially to try and build my bankroll. The other 10%, I'll throw at those lottery tickets to try and win big here and there on the tournament lineups.
Yeah, Austin and I have been doing this show together for 3 years, and I think it becomes very evident because that's exactly how I would describe cash versus tourney. Is cash is about building bankroll, and tourney's about blowing that bankroll on lottery tickets. You're hoping to win $1 million, but if you can double your money for the week, that's exactly what you were looking to do. And so that's kind of the difference. This is a very user and beginner friendly show, mainly because I look at myself as a novice when it comes to DFS. A lot of the stuff that I teach other folks or things that I picked up on this show. More importantly, while this is not a live show, if you guys drop questions throughout the show, we monitor our YouTube all the time. And if you ask a really good question, we're going to find a way to get it into the show sheet for the next week, because the whole point is if you have that question, others probably have that question too. So as Austin alluded to, cash is where he makes his money, and cash is where we're going to focus with this show. If you tuned in last year, it was kind of a he said, she said with Austin and Kelly covered our tournament play. Well, Kelly, as I mentioned, is not going to be able to do the show with us this year. So we are going to start the show top heavy with Austin talking about his favorite cash plays. And so you're going to hear a lot of Austin at the beginning of the show. Unless I really agree or really disagree with the pick, I'm going to smile, nod, and we're going to move on to the next player. Once we get to the back end of the show, I do enjoy tournament play, and I love finding like the weird punt plays and things like that. So once we get to the back end, I'm going to give some of my input on some of the tournament plays I like. And then as I alluded to, we will also be going head to head along with the way you guys can play with us. So we will announce lineups just for bragging rights, where he and I are going to announce lineups at the end of the show and see who does better. He is going to build a very cash methodical lineup. I'm going to end up building a tourney methodical lineup. And this week, I even did an ode to Kelly Singh. If you watched this show last year, you know what that means, but we'll get into that in just a moment. Getting to our cash plays, we like to break things down in tiers about how much money these players are going to cost you of your total salary cap. Our first segment we call top of the class, and putting it simply, these are the best players right now. These are going to cost you over $8,000, but they are the players that we believe are worth spending that money. Austin, as you talk about these players, I do want you to throw in one last thing. While we focus on FanDuel and DraftKings, there is a little bit of a different salary structure for those two websites, but we try to always include both of those. So Austin, bring us into top of the class.
Yeah, so we're going to start with Josh Allen, who is $8,000 on DraftKings and $9,200 on FanDuel. I'm going to talk just briefly about why those pricing structures are different. If you have never played before, DraftKings has a $50,000 salary cap. FanDuel has a $60,000 salary cap. So there's just more salary cap available on FanDuel. They do have scoring differences. They're very slight. Quarterbacks are scored the same, except on DraftKings. If a quarterback passes for 300 yards, they get 3 bonus points. If they rush for 100 yards, they also get 3 bonus points. The other scoring differences is that DraftKings is a full PPR website. FanDuel is a half PPR website, and receivers, tight ends, and running backs get a 100-yard rushing or receiving bonus, which is, again, 3 points. Defenses are scored pretty similarly across the two sites. So that's a quick breakdown of the differences between the two sites. Now, for Josh Allen, honestly, it's week 1, y'all. We don't know a ton about these teams actually, right? We think we know a ton because we've been doing a bunch of best ball. Yep. So I'm going with the surest quarterback out there for fantasy.
I was going to throw in, this might be the first time, certainly for week 1, that your top of the class was a quarterback. Yes. But maybe ever, like, you typically go running back or wide receiver. You're not always a spend up at quarterback guy, but this week it's worth it, huh?
This week it's worth it because the quarterbacks later that are lower down in salary, honestly, some of them have some matchups that scare me. Like Dak Prescott is a guy I would typically be looking at. He's playing Cleveland. They have a great defense. I don't love that matchup. So sticking with Josh Allen because first off, Buffalo has a 26.75 implied team total this week, meaning that the Vegas betting lines think that Buffalo is going to score nearly 27 points, which is the second highest total on the week among any of the teams. And Arizona, it's because Arizona's defense is just bad. We know nothing about them. They don't have a great roster. So I think it's just a safe bet for week 1. Josh Allen has that rushing floor, and I think he's going to be able to pass the ball pretty successfully against his Cardinals defense. I was also able to find value elsewhere, as you'll see soon.
Yeah, and that's something that you'll preach throughout the show, and I don't want to stand on your soapbox, but when you do have to pay up at a certain position, you have to be able to find value elsewhere, and that kind of facilitates those things in your lineup. It's funny how you brought up the bad Arizona defense. On our show on Wednesday night, we always do an upside downside pick, and I picked James Cook as my downside, and then I have the Arizona defense ranked as like my 30th fantasy defense this year. Now, my reasoning behind picking James Cook is that I think Josh Allen's going to do all the work. So I'm actually in with you on this pick, but I'm already scared about saying James Cook might not score a touchdown when this Arizona defense is probably not going to stop him from scoring a touchdown. So mildly concerned there, but I hope you're right. I hope it's all Josh Allen.
Yeah, it could be, I will say James Cook, good tournament play for that very reason.
Oof. Sorry for folks I did wrong on Wednesday, but that's another show. You guys didn't hear any of that. Our next section we call the band nerds. These are your good students, but they spend a little bit too much time practicing their instrument, meaning that they're just not ready to reach that top of the class. And what we really mean is these are your $6,000 to $8,000 players. These are the mid-tier guys that are probably, I don't want to say going to fill the bulk of your roster, but it's a very important part of your roster, depending on how you're going to build your lineup. And Austin, you got a couple of good plays here.
Yeah. And, when we're looking at these players, we're looking for players who are going to 3X their salary. So we're going to use Rachaad White as an example. He is $6,300 on DraftKings. He's $7,700 on FanDuel. On DraftKings, we want him to score about a little bit over 18 points. So that salary, that's 6.3. 6 times 3 is 18. 0.3 is times 3 is 0.9. So 18.9 points. That's what we're aiming for.
There you go.
Washington
math, folks. This is a fucking school show, my guys. We're teaching you math on top of everything else.
Incredible. I was the teacher once, so it's still in there. Washington barely has a defense. I literally don't know who's on this defense anymore because they traded away all their players. And Rachaad White, he was just a consistent cash play last year. I'm just kind of betting on that to continue this year. I think they're going to continue to give him some volume. I expect Tampa Bay to be ahead in this game. And there's a good chance he gets in the end zone. He got a bunch of dump off passes last year. It feels good. Rachaad White, I'm not worried about him in my lineup. I am a little bit more worried about my second cash pick, but I do still like him. It's Drake London. And if you know me, I'm a Falcons fan. So, of course, I'm a little bit biased by this. But Kirk Cousins is in town. It is time for this team to pass the dang ball. Drake London had a 22.8% target share last season. If Kirk Cousins has 40 pass attempts, which is very viable, that's 9 targets. And if Drake London gets 9 targets, 8 catches on 9 targets, like, I feel good about that. I think the volume is going to be there. Now that Kirk Cousins is going to be in that offense, they're going to want to run Bijan Robinson, but I think that's only going to help Drake London's efficiency. So I feel really good. And the thing is, his price is really good too. He's $6K on DraftKings. He's only $6,700 on FanDuel. I think that's because a little bit that he will be favored by the full PPR setting. FanDuel, you're looking for touchdowns. Even more so than catches because it's a half PPR site, similar to Underdog Fantasy. But I still like Drake London just for the amount of volume that he's expected to get in Atlanta this year.
When you look at that Falcons offense, is there a concern that there's no proven second wide receiver? Or are we just assuming that's Kyle Pitts? Because I love Darnell Mooney as much as the next person, and I hope 2024 is to the moon for the moon dog. But with Drake London, he's been the only wide receiver there for quite some time, and it's worked out well for target volume. And we've also seen Kirk Cousins hyper target his wide receiver one. Is there any concern we need to be worrying about with double teams, or should we just be happy about the fact that we have a quarterback that can actually fit a ball into double coverage now?
I think also Zach Robinson is coming from this McVay tree. He's going to get creative. He's not going to be just kind of, a vanilla offense, how we may have seen in the past. And so I think it's going to be fine with Drake London. And I think Kyle Pitts fits that second receiver role just fine. Also, Bijan Robinson being in the backfield, like it's going to be choose your battles, because if they do decide to double cover Drake London, Bijan is going to be there for a dump off, and he might just take it 10, 15 yards because all the attention's on Drake London. So it's going to be choose your battles here. And I think it'll help Drake London overall.
Yeah, I like that. I just didn't like all the hype we were hearing from Tyler Algier. While I was a big Tyler Algier supporter until Bijan Robinson got there, I just can't deal with all this involvement right now. Get the ball to my guy, Bijan. Moving on, we're going to go to Bookworms. These are the quiet kids with their nose in the books. Easily underestimated, but watch out. They are sharp. We're looking at players between 4,000 and 6,000. And these are the players where you have to scroll down a little bit to find them, but there's gold in them there, Hills, Austin.
Yes, there is. And one of the pieces of gold that has been there all off season, if you've been playing best ball, is Jerome Ford, who is $5,500 on DraftKings and $6,200 on FanDuel. Now, somebody at FanDuel just forgot to do their freaking job, because Nick Chubb is priced higher than Jerome Ford on FanDuel. I don't understand how that happens. He's not starting. He's on the PUP list.
I was literally saying, folks, if you're not aware, Nick Chubb is not playing for the first 4 weeks of the season. So that's not right.
Yeah, it's just messed up. And the fact Nick Chubb's been going ahead of him by ADP. So it's been off for a while. But the thing about Jerome Ford, this is just a volume play. There's no one else in this backfield. It's not just that Nick Chubb is hurt. It's that they don't have any other true competitors in the backfield. Like Pierre Strong is in that backfield, but I don't think he's really going to contend for serious touches. Like, it's Jerome Ford's backfield until somebody that we have literally never heard of or has never been fantasy relevant takes it from him.
I think that's fair. Is there any concern about the strength of the Dallas defense when it comes to Jerome Ford? They're great at pass rush. They're great at takeaways. They're not an exclusively run-stopping defense, but they are a strong defense. But the volume outweighs the worry, if you will, there.
Yeah, I'm really just focused on the volume for this. I'm not as worried about the matchup. To your point, Dallas isn't that great of a run defense, and I kind of could see them taking a step back initially. They're installing a new defense. Dan Quinn's no longer in town, so we'll see what happens after week one. But I'm going where I know the volume is, and for this price range, Jerome Ford is about as safe as bet as it's going to get from the running back position.
I like it. This might be a new record for DFS Academy, at least since Kelly Singh joined the show. We're just now getting to our first tight end play of the entire episode, which is not been the history of this show, as Kelly Singh thoroughly enjoys her tight ends.
Yeah, so we have Evan Engram, which is interesting because I'm not a huge Evan Engram guy, but he's $5,500 on DraftKings, $6,200 on FanDuel. This is more of a DraftKings play. I don't know that I would play Evan Engram on FanDuel. I'd probably look somewhere else where I think there might be some touchdowns, because Evan Engram is a PPR monster. He broke the record for the most receptions by a tight end ever in the season last year. I imagine that's going to continue to happen. Miami was not great against tight ends last year. And I do foresee Jacksonville actually having to pass the ball a decent amount to keep up. Like, Miami is a fiery offense. And so I think Trevor Lawrence is going to have to air it out, and he's going to be looking for guys like Evan Engram pretty often. Evan Engram became one of his security blankets. So it wouldn't shock me if Engram ended up with 6-7 catches. I mean, if he gets 6 catches for 50 yards, that's 11 points right there. He's already doubled his salary. If he happens to fall into the end zone, you're golden. He's killing it for you. So love Evan Engram there. I also am a fan of Demario Douglas this week, who is $4,800 on DraftKings, and he's a whopping 4K on FanDuel.
Which is the min on FanDuel, right?
Exactly. Somebody else forgot to do their job on FanDuel, because literally he's priced below like 4th, 5th string receivers on FanDuel. I have no idea what happened there. It's like somebody forgot that he was on the roster and then had to add him back in later on. He was one of the better punt plays in 2023, though. I've been a fan of him for a while.
He led the Patriots in targets.
He led the Patriots in targets. And again, New England is in a similar situation. As I just mentioned with Jacksonville, they're probably going to be playing from behind. They're playing Cincinnati. So I could see it just being throughout the game. Like Demario Douglas just continues to get more and more targets, a few catches, and that enables him to pay off his salary. Plus, it helps me spend up to get Josh Allen, who can help carry my team.
What's interesting, and I'm going to use the Patriots as the analogy, Austin. You mentioned how Douglas, it seems they forgot to price him and just threw him in at the league minimum. I originally started doing a DFS show with Kira Wojtrowski back in the day. And Kira used to always talk in these early weeks about how rookies were priced inappropriately. And I, when doing my rankings today, didn't find a lot of rookie value. And then when you bring up the Patriots have these 2 rookie wide receivers that everybody really wants to like, in Jalen Polk and Javon Baker. But Demario Douglas and the veterans are likely to lead this wide receiver core. Just swinging this question all the way back, did you notice, because you don't really have any rookies picked either, did they get better at pricing rookies? Is this class overhyped? Kind of what's going on with these rookies?
I think they have gotten a little better at pricing them, but I think it's a little bit of an overreaction, because I do think we saw this in best ball in the offseason too, that rookies were really pushed up the board, even though it's very rare that multiple rookies really pop in a given season. Part of the reason I'm not talking about rookies yet is because we're in the cash portion of the show, and
good point.
I'm looking for security, and I'm trying to hedge my bets here. If you're new to this, like on DraftKings, you need to be scoring 140 to 150 points to pretty consistently hit the cash line. Whereas to win a tournament, you need to be scoring well over 200 points, most likely, unless you're in a really small tournament like our tournaments in our contest. Then you can win with a little bit of 170 point or 180 points. But for some of the larger field stuff, you need to be over 200 points. So I will take the volatility of a rookie there, where some rookie might pop unexpectedly. But for cash, I'm not risking having a rookie, run 5 routes and catch 1 ball all game.
No, I love that. That's such a good point that I didn't even think about, is we're talking about the safe plays, which is actually going to be my segment when we go into the next section, or my segue when we go into the next section, but we'll get to that in a moment. Now, for my favorite, Austin named all these categories when we developed this show a few years ago. And of all the names he gave a category, C's get degrees just spoke to me, because it was my college motto. It's how I lived life all those years ago. These are the punt plays. These are your sub $4,000 plays. And when we say sub 4,000, we're talking DraftKings. 4,000 is as low as it goes on FanDuel, but these are still going to be some relatively bottom of the barrel plays. And Austin, again, this is usually where you fit defense in, but I was going to say you kind of have everything perfectly spaced out to talk some defense to end the cash portion of the show.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't able to find a ton of value on the slate actually this week. I didn't like really any of the receivers or the tight ends below 4K. I usually will pick a punt at tight end, but didn't feel good about it this week. But I did find the Tampa Bay Buccaneers nice at 3,500 on DraftKings, all the way up at 4,900 on FanDuel. They're actually the second highest priced defense on FanDuel. This is essentially betting against a rookie quarterback. And I think there's a lot of interesting plays against rookie quarterbacks, but rookies, they tend to struggle. It's just the nature of being a rookie quarterback in the NFL. In particular, though, Jaden Daniels led all quarterbacks in this class in pressure to sack ratio, and Washington has an awful offensive line. So that just sings to me, because if Tampa Bay can get 2 or 3 sacks, that's a solid floor for this defense. That's what I'm looking for in a good cash defense, is sacks and turnovers. Those are the 2 things that are going to carry my team. A rookie quarterback is a great candidate to turn the ball over, particularly one that likes to take sacks.
What I love is sacks and turnovers. When I did my stream of the week for defense, that's precisely what I pitch. And a lot of what we're doing here with DFS is a lot. What do I do on stream of the week? I just don't take pricing into account, but you're looking for sacks and turnovers when you're looking for fantasy defense. That's why you should not be spending high draft picks in your redraft leagues on the Baltimore Ravens. I have no idea what's going on in the game. Austin and I record this during the game, but I bet you didn't feel great about starting Baltimore against the Chiefs. And I hope when I turn my TV back on, it's heavily in favor of the Chiefs. Mainly because I like the Chiefs, but also because I want people who drafted the Baltimore Ravens to feel terrible about it. But that is the end of our cash segment. And Austin, Austin and I were trying to discuss what we wanted to call the segment when we pivoted to tourney talk. And Austin brought up dodgeball. I brought up recess. But the long and short of it is, everything we did earlier was playing it safe, and we got wild with dodgeball and recess. So I still don't know which one of those two I want to go with. If you guys have an opinion, should we call when we move to tournaments dodgeball? Should we call it recess? We like to stick with the school theme. But what we're going to do, Austin just gave you his favorite cash plays. We are going to break down our favorite tourney plays. So we were going from playing it safe to we're looking for the big points. And Austin, I think this guy is a guy who I think a lot of people are going to be looking for the big points with this entire season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going with CJ Stroud for this pick of mine on the tournament side. I think it's just a little bit like I could see it. Well, actually, part of the reason I want to do this is because I want to play one of his receivers that I think has been faded too much, which is Stefon Diggs. We'll talk about him later. And that makes me want to play CJ Stroud because one of the things about tournaments is that it is incredibly important to stack and correlate your team. We have talked about this in Best Ball on the Summer School show. The same principle applies here. The idea is if you're trying to bet on a ceiling outcome that will help you win a tournament, it is smarter to bet on a team to pop off and to pick multiple players from that team and from that game so that you are trying to throw fewer darts and fewer things have to go right for you. So in this case, if Houston is playing really well and they're scoring a bunch of points, first off, it's probably going to happen because of CJ Stroud. It's probably going to happen because of some of his receivers. And Indianapolis is probably also going to have to pass the ball and score a bunch of points in order to keep up. This game has a 48.5 point over under. It's not one of the highest. It's not the highest on the slate, but it's up there. It's one of the top 4 highest this weekend. And Houston is favored. So I am trying to target the Houston side of that. But I do think there are other people that folks might go after that might be a little bit more interesting. There's probably going to be a lot of Josh Allen because he plays a bad defense. There's probably going to be folks looking for value, but I want to bet on CJ Stroud this week, and I really want to bet on his receivers.
No, I think that's a really great point to bring up is you said don't be afraid to take 2 or 3 players from the same team, and you kind of introduced me to something a few years ago, which was also don't be afraid to backdoor it and take somebody from the other team who will also benefit. And I think the story I got told, or I say the story I got told, the philosophy I got told my first year hosting a DFS show was tell a story and then pick players that make sense for that story. So your story is that Houston and Indy is going to be a high scoring game and you're going to figure out a way to work that. My story actually developed last night because, as you pointed out, Arizona has a terrible defense. Well, a terrible defense not only helps Josh Allen, but it also means Kyler Murray is probably going to have to do a lot of work in this game to keep Houston in this game. And I'm going to tell you folks, if you go look at the Buffalo defense, it's not the Buffalo defense you remember from years past. It is a very different. They lost Matt Milano. Their secondary is absolutely terrible. You are now dealing with a Kyler Murray who has Marvin Harrison Jr., an established Trey McBride that we saw towards the end of last year. 2 good running backs. We'd like to see a better second wide receiver there. But the long and short of it is Kyler Murray can get it done with his legs alone. And that's kind of what I'm banking on in this game is if he throws 2 touchdowns, great. But man, I'd love to see him rush another one in there. And this is a situation where he is 6,400 on DraftKings versus 7,900 on FanDuel. He's not my favorite priced player on FanDuel. He kind of kicks up a little bit, but I feel like on DraftKings, he is just an immense value. And because we do our head-to-head Austin on DraftKings, that was where he jumped off the page for me. Just for a little how the sausage is made. I originally had Tua Tagovailoa here, and after working on my rankings all day today, I went from I love Tua Tagovailoa to I hate Tua Tagovailoa, and I'm very concerned that in that Jacksonville-Miami game, we could see those Miami running backs, Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert, take over. And Austin, you've kind of hit on this. Tua might be almost a safer tournament play. It's that he didn't make your list, and that's fine. I don't think he has the upside that you need, or excuse me, a safer cash play. I don't think he has the upside you need for a tournament play. And so that's why I pivoted to Kyler Murray there.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. The other thing about Tua is he doesn't run the ball. And I think that's one of the things that makes it hard.
At all. If you go look at the quarterback rushing numbers from last season, Tua, I think, is in double digits, which is just unheard of. And it's hilarious to look at. It is so small on how few yards he had. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it was bad.
So. Yeah, no, that makes it hard for him to be a really viable tournament quarterback. However, he wasn't the really maker lineup week 1 of last year.
Well, yeah, it also helps when you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle to throw the ball too. So there is upside there, folks. There is. I'm just worried for this week. It's going to be the running backs. Speaking of the running backs, Austin, I put that we are going to give our one favorite play, and I'm always going to be one, but that's because I'm the host and people should be here to listen to you talk. So if you want to talk about both these guys, talk about both these guys. We're doing great on time. It's really up to you, buddy, how you want to handle it.
Yeah. So I'll start with Najee Harris, which I didn't expect to like him as much as I did this week, but Atlanta's not a good defense, y'all. Like, I don't care that we just got Matt Judon. We don't have a good defense. I expect this team to be pretty bad. Maybe they're better now that they got Jesse Bates in there as well. And they made some late roster moves, but I don't see it with this defense. And I think people are kind of down on Jaylen Warren. So one thing that you'll find that I try and do a lot whenever I'm playing tournaments is I really try and find the players that nobody else is going to be playing, because that's the way you get unique. You get some upside. Now, you want to have some players that are just good picks that are going to hit the ceiling, like a CJ Stroud, that have that ability. But you also need to get a little bit different to actually win a tournament. I think Najee Harris, he's going to be in an Arthur Smith offense. He could get goal line touches. He could get 2 touchdowns, and that could really pay off at a salary. He's only $5,600 on DraftKings. He's $6,700 on FanDuel. So I think it's worth the swing there just for the potential upside. I also have Alvin Kamara.
Absolutely.
Because he plays he's on the
Carolina Panthers. Yeah.
He plays the Carolina Panthers, who are also garbage. I don't even know if they have Derek Brown.
That's it. And then Derek Brown. Shaq Thompson was hurt most of training camp. So
yeah, it's rough out there. He is a little bit more pricey, which I think could actually prevent some people from playing him, because he's $6,700 on DraftKings. He's $7,100 on FanDuel. He also gets a lot of dump off passes from Derek Carr. So I think he has some really good upside. And I think he's going to go pretty low rostered because people are going to be down on the Saints and not want to really invest in this matchup. I expect them to look elsewhere.
Yeah, I think Austin's hitting on some good points that I want to elaborate for you guys. You're going to hear, anytime you talk to anyone about DFS, you're going to hear about, projected rostership percentage and rostership percentage. When you are dealing with cash games, you honestly don't care about that. As Austin pointed out, your goal is, I think you said 130 to 140 points, correct, Austin? That's what you're looking for there.
Yeah.
If you have 8 of the exact same players as your opponent, but you are the one who was right on the 9th, you win. And that's what the goal is there. Down here, you're going to hear us talk about this phrase a lot. It's about getting different, because you have to beat 100,000 other people, sometimes 200,000 other lineups if you want to win $1 million. So that's where you're going to notice some of these where we talk about guys like Najee Harris, where the fantasy community loves Jaylen Warren and they seem to forget he's hurt. So they're going to lean on other guys and think maybe Najee's getting thrown out there. But in this new offense, Najee's a very important guy. Alvin Kamara might be a little too pricey in other people's books. In a PPR league, Alvin Kamara gives you the ability to start a 4th wide receiver. You start Alvin Kamara on DraftKings and in PPR. For me, it's Kenneth Walker. And this isn't so much that I love Kenneth Walker. I do feel like Kenneth Walker is kind of a forgotten man in Seattle. When he came out as a rookie, we all wanted to love him. We were concerned about his pass catching ability, and that's still a concern. But then they drafted Zach Charbonnet, and everybody backed up off of Kenneth Walker. But if you look at the numbers last year, Kenneth Walker handled 70% of the red zone carries, 2/3 of the total carries. While he did split passing game work and there wasn't a ton of passing game work, he gets the job done in the red zone. And that matters because of his opponent. And that is who I'm picking on here. That is the Denver Broncos. And all I'm going to remind you folks is go look at the Denver-Miami game from last year, because Denver's fantasy points against was broken for 2 straight months because of what Miami did to them in that game. I believe it was 6 rushing touchdowns. It may have been 7. It may have been 5. It was a lot by both running backs. And this is a situation where I think Kenneth Walker could literally blow the lid off of this slate, because Kenneth Walker could walk out of this game with 3 touchdowns. And that's kind of what I'm banking on, because they do have a great corner who could potentially slow down DK Metcalf. You have a unestablished Jackson Smith and Jigba. You have a getting older Tyler Lockett. This could be a situation where Seattle wants to focus on their running backs. And if they do, I think it could be a good game for Kenneth Walker against that porous Denver Broncos defense, Austin.
Yeah, I almost put Kenneth Walker for this slate, but you had already written him down, so I didn't talk about him. But I think that's a great pick, and I definitely think there's a lot of upside involved. I also think they love him in Seattle, and they're excited about how I've heard positive reports in camp. So I think there's a good chance that he's able to have a really good season.
The one last thing I want to throw in is on his pricing. As I mentioned, he does not pass catches, and I think that has deflated his price maybe a little bit too far on DraftKings at 6,100. On FanDuel, he's at 7,400. I think they're accounting for his touchdown upside, but don't overthink this. 3 touchdowns matters on DraftKings as well. So if you can get those 3, that's that 3 times the salary Austin was talking about. Everything else is icing on the hopefully $1 million cake for you. Austin, let's move on to the wide. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, on that three times the salary point in cash, if they don't hit 3 times the salary, it doesn't kill your lineup. That's the beauty of cash. In tournament, you need every player to hit 3 times.
Every one of them, if you want $1 million, and not even just $1 million. There are tournaments out there that aren't just the Millie Maker. I am a lottery ticket player, so you're always going to hear me refer to the Millie Maker. But there are so many tournaments. Austin opened my eyes to all of the possibilities I was able to play last year. So.
Yeah, for sure. You'll hear me talk about smaller tournaments throughout the season, but I will have a Millie Maker this week.
I would say it's going to be a good contrast, I think, this season, because Austin plays it safe. It's almost tortoise in the hair. Austin plays it safe and does far better than me. I shoot for the moon, and man, do I end up with egg on my face quite often. But I own my losses, and I have a lot of fun with it. Austin, you got some wide receivers for me. You picked 4. Again, we're doing great on time. So if you want to talk about all these guys, I'm going to give you all the time you want.
Yeah, I'll talk about these just I'll talk about some of them quickly and some of them for long. So first, I did want to start off with Stefon Diggs. I alluded to him earlier when I made my CJ Stroud pick. I am building one of my tournament lineups around this duo because I think Stefon Diggs has been slept on this offseason. People have all sorts of negative narratives about him after the way things went in Buffalo last year. I think he's still an incredible wide receiver. They weren't even really designing plays to get him specifically targeted in games towards the end of last year. He was out there as a decoy at sometimes. That's not going to be the case in Houston. He's going to be out there to catch passes, and I think he's going to be a great target for CJ Stroud. He's $6,700 on DraftKings and $6,800 on FanDuel, so he's pretty cheap. And I mean, he has the ability to be the wide receiver 1 any given week. In the same matchup, I am looking at Alec Pierce as a bring back to save some salary, but also I think that he could be viable for a couple of down the field targets, just a couple chunk plays. He's 4K on DraftKings. If my guy gets a touchdown and 3 catches, we're good. That's all we need. He's basically a tight end. And I do think that Indy actually really likes him. It sounded like he looked good during the preseason, so I'm kind of buying in on that. And also, I think he's probably going to be low rostered. I would be shocked if he was above 5% rostered. Even above 3% would shock me, just based on all the other players that people could be looking at in this range.
I was just going to say, I feel like he is the forgotten man in the Colts wide receiver rotation. But Austin, I feel like it's for good reason. I'm just not an Alec Pierce guy. And what's funny is all rookie season, you were AD Mitchell, this, that, and the other. And now you're like Alec Pierce. And I understand this is not a season-long prediction. This is a week 1. And again, this goes to the point I brought up earlier about backdoor plays, because you're telling your story that Houston is going to win this game and probably handily. and Indianapolis is going to need to throw some deep balls. Obviously, Michael Pittman is going to see a ton of attention. So Alec Pierce is the next veteran up in that offense, especially with them losing Jelani Woods yet again.
Yeah, I will say I do like AD Mitchell in this matchup as well. So like I kind of was deciding between those two. And AD Mitchell is a little bit cheaper. So if you decide you just want to go with the cheaper guy,
there you go. You need a punt play every now and then.
Yeah, exactly. Other guy I like is Jakobi Meyers. I still don't understand why people don't respect this man. It feels personal at this point.
What has he done to you?
I don't understand. He is $5K on DraftKings. He's $5,100 on FanDuel. To me, last year, whenever him and Devontae Adams were on the field at the same time, it felt like it was kind of a toss-up of which one of the two of them was going to hit a 20-point week. And I felt like they both had the ability to do it. And I think they could even do it together. And your boy, Garner Minshew, like he can sling the ball around. He's not great. I don't love him the way you do, Ryan. But
let me be clear. I love him as a human being. I recognize his flaws as a quarterback. He has no flaws as a human being. Let me be perfectly clear. But I recognize his flaws as a quarterback. He is way too much of a gunslinger. But in a situation like DFS, you're not betting on Gardner Minshew. You don't care how many picks he throws. If he puts the Raiders in a hole, that opens up a lot of passing attempts for Jakobi Meyers. So
exactly. So I like him as a contrarian option this week. I also like Brian Thomas. So I did give a shout out to one of the rookies.
Rookie alert.
Yes, rookie alert. I think that, like I mentioned earlier, Jacksonville could be running behind in this matchup, trying to keep up with I forgot already who they're playing in this game. Miami, trying to keep up with Miami. And I think Brian Thomas, like to me, he was kind of slept on throughout the preseason and the offseason. Like he was, by many people's metrics, the fourth best receiver in this class. And so I think there's definitely a possibility that he popped. They got rid of Calvin Ridley. He's kind of taking over that role. They need a traditional X. He can serve that role in this offense. And I think that there's opportunity for him he could be one of the rookies that scores in their first game because that's the type of player he is.
I think watching the story of Brian Thomas unfold this offseason, for folks who don't know, I do not watch college football in any way, shape, or form. I learn about rookies when I find out who is in the draft, and then I do research. Do not get me wrong. And I tell you, I will argue landing spots with anybody because I understand the NFL and I understand landing spots. I just don't know who the hell these kids are until they actually are in the draft. So Brian Thomas, as Austin mentioned, was a wide receiver 4. And when I did my research, he slotted right in as my wide receiver 4, Austin. And then you look, and 2 of the top 3 guys, while uber talented, do not get me wrong, landed in less than ideal spots. And yet, Brian Thomas, there was no consideration of moving him up. And if anything, I felt like we all turned on him, and all of a sudden we didn't like him anymore, though he ends up with a very good quarterback in a very fantasy-friendly offense, with a wide receiver 1 who is a traditional slot wide receiver who also has an injury history. Brian Thomas could, I dare say, be the alpha of this wide receiver core rather quickly, more quickly than the other. Well, maybe not Malik Neighbors, certainly not more quickly than him. He was the alpha the second the Giants said the first syllable of his name, because that's the Giants offense, but that's another story for another day. But no, I agree with you, Austin. Brian Thomas is interesting. And what I also like is, the knock on Brian Thomas is we didn't see it for more than 1 year. But what we saw in that 1 year was very good. And more importantly, it fits what the Jacksonville Jaguars want and need out of a wide receiver. I think if we see a rookie pop, it's Marvin Harrison. But if we see 2 rookies pop, I think it's Brian Thomas Jr. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, I was going to say, and for my wide receiver, you mentioned Calvin Ridley's gone. Well, that's because he went over to Tennessee. And one of the things I liked, the second Calvin Ridley got in Tennessee, everybody, with the exception of maybe DeAndre Hopkins himself, was referring to Calvin Ridley as the Titans wide receiver 1. Like, he stepped in there and they knew he was the wide receiver 1. And I think that speaks to the step DeAndre Hopkins has lost in age, and he's already hurt. I don't believe he's playing this week. I don't know if he's confirmed out, but I don't believe he's playing this week. This is a situation where the Tennessee Titans are playing the Bears. The Bears have an improving but not great defense, but more importantly, they have an improving offense. And I think this could be a game that gets a few more passing touchdowns than what we've seen in the past. And Will Levis is a guy that we have seen stack touchdowns, and more importantly, stack touchdowns to his wide receiver 1. Will Levis had that 4-touchdown game last year where 3 of those touchdowns went to DeAndre Hopkins. That's the kind of stuff I look for on a pop play. And then when you look at the pricing, 5,800 on DraftKings, 6,200 on FanDuel. I'm going to focus on DraftKings because it's supposed to be, the PPR thing. Calvin Ridley's competition for targets right now, assuming DeAndre Hopkins does not play, is Tyler Boyd, Chigoziem Okonkwo, and Treylon Burks. Calvin Ridley could hit 10, 11, 12 targets, and then it's just how many does he reel in and how many of those are in the red zone and the end zone. So that's why I'm big on Calvin Ridley this week. I love seeing wide receiver ones that are this moderately priced, Austin.
Yeah, I think that's a really good play. Definitely something that I would be considering. And to your point, like there could be just so much volume, and Will Levis is going to push the ball down the field too.
Yes.
So it could be a really interesting play for Calvin Ridley.
And folks, we're just about to bring it home. I do want to remind you guys, you can play with us. Check the links in the description of this video. You will find links to play with us on DraftKings, on FanDuel. Once you get into kind of like our player pool, you're going to get invited to all the matchups. So we do showdown matchups. We typically can get anywhere from 5 to 12 people in these showdown matchups. So there's a decent amount of money to be won. It's more about bankroll building. It's more about having fun. And again, we will announce the winners live, not live, but recorded on this show. So you'll get to hear your name out for the world next week. Austin, we're getting to the end of our tournament plays. We have tight ends and defense because we talk about all the positions here. And your story of the Houston offense continues.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of Dalton Schultz ending up in the end zone. I think in part the reason I like this is because if you're going to try and double stack this matchup, people might be tempted to do like Nico Collins and Stefon Diggs or try and get Tank Dell in there. I don't think they're going to run a ton of 3 receiver sets in Houston this year. I think it's going to be a bunch of 2 tight end sets. They're going to run 12 personnel, which means Dalton Schultz is going to be on the field. They are going to run the ball a decent amount. I think that won't be a problem for the pass catchers hitting their ceiling in this game anyways. Like that's what I'm betting on, this narrative I'm telling myself. But I do think Dalton Schultz, he'll be on the field because he'll be in 12 personnel. And if he gets in the end zone, like we're doing pretty well. He's at 4,900 on DraftKings, $5,600 on FanDuel. Like he will get some targets and he'll be another option out there. So I think, just going the game theory route, I'm betting on this Houston-Indianapolis game. And I like having Dalton Schultz getting a little bit different than some of the pass catchers in that offense.
Yep. And for me, it's a very similar game theory. I believe the Miami-Jacksonville game is going to be a very high scoring game. And when we just talked about Brian Thomas, but Evan Engram proved last year, he's probably the current wide receiver 1 in this offense. The targets, the catches. And I think last year he only scored like 4 touchdowns. So you're hoping we're going to see some positive regression when it comes to the touchdowns. I think Evan Engram is a high volume play this week at a pretty modest price, 5,500 on DraftKings, 6,200 on FanDuel. Austin talked about Evan Engram and his cash play. I don't have a whole lot to add there, but again, this is on the game theory that he's not the highest priced tight end, but he has the ability to be the highest scoring tight end. And that's kind of where I'm going with that when it comes to my, choice of tight end. Austin, we obviously got to bring it home with defense. And again, you talked earlier with your cash play defense that you were going to pick on a rookie, and it's time to pick on another rookie.
Yeah, so this time I'm going to pick on Caleb Williams, and it's not because I don't like Caleb Williams. I think he's going to be a fantastic player, but he is still a rookie, and I think it would be I think people are not going to want to bet against him. I think there's been so much hype around him that the Tennessee Titans defense could actually be pretty contrarian this week. I'm usually looking for something that's kind of contrarian at defense because it's really freaking hard to predict. I'm looking for defenses that I think could be splashy, that could potentially get a touchdown. I think Tennessee has the potential upside to do that. They're $2,800 on DraftKings and $3,700 on FanDuel. I will say I do also love the Las Vegas Raiders as defense this week, so I may actually end up pivoting off of the Titans in my actual tourney lineups, but those are 2 that I'm looking at. Just looking for kind of upside. I don't play the chalk when it comes to defense because it rarely hits.
Okay, well then let me talk to you about some chalk on defense. I believe they are the highest priced on the slate.
This is good.
What'd you say?
This is good chalk.
Yeah, I believe they're the highest priced. If not, they're very close to the highest price. But that was kind of my theory, Austin, is I don't think people want to pay up for defense. I love your Raiders pick. My favorite defense this week is Houston versus Indy, where we want to pick on some of these inexperienced quarterbacks. But I think there's going to be too much rostership when it comes to Houston. I don't know if people are going to be willing to pay up for the Dallas Cowboys. I am lucky enough to cover the Cleveland Browns for Football Guys during their training camp reports for the preseason. And to put it bluntly, there is no good vibes around the Cleveland offense right now. All they talked about is how Deshaun Watson is barely able to throw the ball down the field. He is looking for intermediate passes. And then you have a Dallas defense that can get after the quarterback, and you have a quarterback working off rust. Deshaun Watson has not taken the ball field since last November. Did not play in the preseason, was supposed to play the third preseason game, and was already experiencing shoulder soreness, and they decided to save him. So he's got a lot of rust to work off. And I don't know that you want to work off rust against DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons. And then you have a very opportunistic defense. And obviously they lost their defensive coordinator, but I don't know that their mindset is going to change a whole lot. And if they know you can't throw the ball deep, they're going to be able to set up zone defenses in the middle of the field and play more man defense because they know you can't beat them deep. I think when I'm looking at defense for tournament play, I am begging for that touchdown, and no defense over the last 3 seasons has scored more touchdowns than the Dallas Cowboys. So that is who I'm going with there. Definitely chalky, but one I'm willing to eat for this specific week just because I hate the Cleveland offense. I like the Dallas defense. I hate the Cleveland offense, Austin. So.
No, I mean, I think it's a good play because of the opponent. The opponent has the potential to be very volatile that way.
Yep. And as we mentioned, while we do play with you guys, we want to have a little fun to wrap up the show. So Austin and I are going to go head to head every week. We are going to use DraftKings scoring and DraftKings prices for these head-to-head lineups. These may or may not be the lineups that we're running up against you guys. It probably will be for me, though I'll probably make some changes because I follow the news. And what you're going to notice is I should be building this lineup much more in a cash mindset, but I don't really have a cash mindset. So my lineup is going to look very different from Austin's lineup. So we'll tell you guys who won every week, but for this week, we're just announcing those week 1 lineups. So Austin, if you go ahead and give it to me, I'll start typing it out.
Yeah. So it's going to be me that wins, by the way.
It probably will be. Let's be clear.
So first off, a lot of these players.
I do want to throw out, I think Austin went like 12-5 against Kelly last year, and it's 100% I'm falling into the exact same trap. And again, ode to Kelly Singh with my lineup falling into that exact same trap. But Austin, go ahead.
So a lot of players that we talked about already. I have Josh Allen at quarterback at 8K. My running backs are Rachaad White at 6,300 and Jerome Ford at 5,500. I've got 4 receivers. Supposed to put a receiver in the flex, a little bit more upside there. I got Drake London at 6K, Deontay Johnson at 5,300. Demario Douglas at 4,800. And I know I talked about him for tournaments, but I have him as a cash play too. Jakobi Meyers at 5K. Evan Engram is my tight end at 5,500. And I've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense at 3,500. Got $100 left over in my salary to play with.
I had $100 left over until I made that quarterback change because, as I mentioned, I started off with Tua Tagovailoa, and then I very much went against that. So again, you're going to hear a lot of mine being my favorite tournament plays, and that is going to be Kyler Murray starting off as my quarterback, and then Kenneth Walker and Javonte Williams. And we didn't really talk about Javonte Williams on this show. Seattle is another team that gets beat by running backs, and Javonte Williams should be heavily involved in the passing game. You have a rookie quarterback there and no established wide receiver 2, no good tight end. Javonte Williams, I believe it was week 1 of last season, or if not, it was the season before, had 11 targets in the very first week. I think we could see that again. Calvin Ridley is a guy like we didn't really talk about. Terry McLaurin, Jaden Daniels is probably going to need to lean on his wide receiver 1, and that's again a game that I think could get out of hand. So we should see a big game from Terry McLaurin. Nobody knows who Josh Allen's wide receiver 1 is. We obviously love Josh Allen. I want it to be Keon Coleman, but I'm not ready to bet on him yet. But I know Khalil Shakir has played some games with Josh Allen because we're playing on DraftKings. I'm focusing on the PPR aspect there. As we talked about, I'm also going Evan Engram. And then in my ode to Kelly Singh, I wanted to have a stack here for all the reasons Austin mentioned earlier in the show. So I went Kyler Murray, and then I doubled up on tight end. Give me Trey McBride, who I think could be Kyler Murray's #1 wide receiver this season, and then finish it out with my Dallas defense. So those are the lineups, me versus Austin. His, a very safe, much smarter play, me shooting for the moon and hopefully hitting some of the stars, I guess is the best way to put it. Austin, what a great show. Once again, folks, if you guys are looking to try to play with us, you are able to do so. Links in the description of this video. We run weekly tournaments on DraftKings and on FanDuel. And as always, we will announce the weekly winner. So starting in week 2, we'll let you guys know who won in week 1. Austin, It's been a long off season, but we are ready to get into the season grind now. What are you going to be doing for us at Club Fantasy? A new show debuting last night.
Yeah, it's all DFS for me. So you'll get my weekly DFS Cash article, the A-list, at clubfantasyffl.com. I'll be here every week, and then we will be doing, Josh Hudson and I will be doing Thursday night showdown slate previews. They'll be dropping every Thursday. The podcast is called Oh Captain My Captain, but it's all DFS focused. That one I'm focusing more on the tournament side of things, because when it's a showdown, the tournament brain really kicks in there. For me, I don't do a ton of cash on the tourney side, but you can be catching that every Thursday. If you watch it now, we appreciate it, and we appreciate the like. It won't help you, but it's nice.
But you can also see how smart my guys are. So hopefully they got it right as I'm talking them up right now. But then you also do an article.
Yes, the A-list.
Did you mention the article? I'm sorry.
I did mention the article.
I thought we led into, I'm sorry, that's my fault. Obviously, I wasn't paying attention as I was reading the show sheet for the outro. So yes, an article every week that I'm now just repeating because I don't know what I'm doing at this point. Here's the long and short of it. I'm terrible at outros. Anybody who's ever watched a show of mine knows that. I hate listing off all the shows. So what I am going to tell you is Club Fantasy has you covered this season. DFS, obviously we got it. We're adding a waiver wire show. Sometimes we just want to vent. We have a show on Mondays where all we do is vent about what happened over the weekend, and we pray for your Monday miracles and hope that we can help you guys get some wins. Shows all over the place. There's no reason for you not to hit that subscribe button. Right now we have 1,200 subscribers. I'd love to tell you we have 1,300 by the next time we get here. Folks, we got you covered. There's no reason not to hit that subscribe button. It is absolutely free. Thank you guys so much. Class is in session again next week. Have a great weekend.